I grew up I talk about it often, I grew up with this intense fear of hell and damnation that was sort of programmed into us. I would call it child abuse, and which is probably why we're starting this once a month group for those who feel like they've been abused spiritually. And of course mine is very minor compared to what some people have gone through. But it was so refreshing to find unity and hear the definition of hell in unity: useless and unnecessary punishment. Let's repeat that together. It's useless and unnecessary punishment. And it's created by our minds because we're programmed to think that we carry guilt and that somehow we deserve this punishment. And we create for ourselves a hell loop, that we keep repeating things over and over and drawing the same things to us over and over in a hell loop. Kind of like Groundhog's Day, only in hell. Does that make sense? There's a TV series, I've not watched it, it's called Lucifer. I don't know if any of you have watched it. I have a friend that's really into it and she loves it. And she told me, well, if you don't want to watch it, at least watch the last episode, where Lucifer finally figures out why everybody's in hell and how to get everybody, including himself, out. And it's all about holding on to self-imposed judgment and guilt. And again, recreating these same scenarios over and over again, that we create these hell loops. And so today we're going to talk about that, because the good news is the mind holds the key. Our feeling nature shows us the way. The outer world reflects to us what we need to look at, and forgiveness is the ticket out. Now let's look at each of those things individually. Let's go deeper. The mind is the key, letting go of any self-judgment or guilt. And some of these things are so subconscious that we don't even know what we did. We just feel guilty. I mean, I grew up in a church where you just felt guilty all the time. You know, it was a gift that kept on giving. I don't know why I'm guilty, but I know I am. You know? And don't we all fall short? Anybody here perfect? Please, please. Oh, we've got a perfect one? I was going to say, come on up, take over. We all fall short, do we not? And we all judge ourselves for falling short. So how do you know what your guilt is or what you think it is? Well, check with your feeling nature. We'll point you the way on your life journey and take you through it to free you from that original cause that may be so subconscious you don't even remember it anymore. Those outer symbols in our world, in our life, are sometimes not easy to read. They're not always a perfect reflection, but there's something there, a piece of the puzzle, that if we follow our feeling nature, it will take us to the key. Again, the outer reflects, and if you have people constantly putting you down, it's probably because you have a belief that you deserve to be. It's the reverse Stuart Smiley effect. Remember Stuart Smiley? I love him so much on the Saturday Night Live. The reverse of him is, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, and gosh darn it, people don't like me. That's the reverse thing that can go through our minds. And so I have a friend that feels shame real easily. You know, if you say just the slightest thing, she'll feel real ashamed. And she wouldn't feel that if she weren't carrying that sense of shame that just needs to be healed. So then we come to the key of letting go, and that's forgiveness, is the freeing power that will free us from our own self-imposed guilt and self-judgment. But first we have to know what forgiveness is and what it isn't. It's not condoning what happened. Just because you forgive someone, that doesn't mean you're condoning what happened. And it's not standing on your high moral high ground, looking down on them and saying, I in my high moral high ground forgive you. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is simply seeing it differently and choosing to let it go. Yeah, it happened. Yeah, it hurt me. But I'm going to see it differently, and I'm just going to let it go so that I can be freed from the bondage of carrying this day after day. Imagine if somebody gave you a 20-pound sack of potatoes and said you had to carry this 20-pound sack of potatoes with you wherever you went. Wouldn't that be a burden? And then imagine letting that 20-pound sack of potatoes go, and how light and how freeing that would be, how that would feel. If you're comfortable, repeat with me. I don't need to be in a hell loop. Together, I don't need to be in a hell loop. I choose to free myself. I choose to free myself. I let go of all self-judgment and guilt. Together, I let go of all self-judgment and guilt. I am an innocent child of light. Together, I am an innocent child of light. The biggest blocks to our manifestations is unforgiveness, and so much of it is on to ourselves. Unforgiveness is simply blocked energy, and we want to free ourselves. Forgiveness frees that so that we can fully manifest a higher and more rich, when I say rich, I'm talking about rich in everywhere, experience. There's a book not called Think and Grow Rich, but Thank and Grow Rich by Pam Grout. I just love her. She said, you can't be freaked out and pissed off and expect to manifest. One of my favorite quotes. Anybody here freaked out and pissed off this week? How's that working for you? You're manifesting. I know that's why I always allow myself a 5-minute whine, but then I gotta let it go after 5 minutes. Reverend Bill Fisher once said, forgiveness is often the prelude to great advances in one's life. Or I like to compare it to a hot air balloon cannot rise up until it drops its sandbags. Once it drops those sandbags, it takes off, it soars. So these hell loops that we create are all about living in the past. And this hologram in front of us can often reflect what we're holding on to from the past. And when we get triggered by someone, it's simply pointing to an old wound that needs to be released so that we can soar. I've often shared one of my favorite but irritating quotes. There are no enemies, only irritating people who call attention to our trouble spots. Let's all say boo together. Boo, I don't like that one either. No, I don't like it either. There's a great biblical story that, when interpreted metaphysically, what is this in me, really reflects this, and that's the story of Abraham and his nephew Lot and his wife fleeing Sodom and Gomorrah. And remember the story? They were told the city was going to be destroyed. Don't look back. Whatever you do, don't look back. And who looked back? Lot's wife. And what happened to her? She turned into a pillar of salt. Now, you know you got to interpret that metaphysically. And this doesn't physically happen. But Sodom and Gomorrah, metaphysically, Sodom represents those hidden subconscious thoughts that consume you with guilt and self-judgment. And Gomorrah represents a state of consciousness adverse to spirit and love. And the salt is the resentment that dries up your life force and turns you to salt. It just dries you right up. Now, it's a process. Forgiveness is a process. Sometimes I forgive too easy, and I'll say, oh yeah, I forgive. But then it comes back, and it keeps coming back. It's a process sometimes. Sometimes it can take 10 seconds, sometimes it can take 10 years, sometimes 10 lifetimes. And it's not always people, it's circumstances of life that sometimes we have to forgive. I think I'm still trying to forgive the church I grew up in, which is probably why I became a minister, so I could teach the truth that would free people. And I remember finally when one of the popes, I don't remember which one it was, finally admitted that hell didn't exist. I thought hell had frozen over at that moment. Can he be saying that? Can I? The Course in Miracles has my favorite one, though. Do you want to be right or do you want to be at peace? Oops. Oops. Do you want to be right or do you want to be at peace? It's a process to forgive until it no longer holds an emotional charge. It can take 10 minutes or 10 lifetimes. One of the greatest stories of forgiveness was Abraham Lincoln, who was an attorney before he was president. And a man hired him for a lawsuit to sue another man for $2.50. Now, the man doing the suing was very wealthy, and he was suing this poor guy who didn't have any money for $2.50. Now, back then, that maybe went a little further than today, but still. So Lincoln said, okay, but I'll charge you $10 to take your case. The man gave him $10. Abraham Lincoln went to the client, gave him half of that, $5, and then said, no, take half of that and pay the guy $2.50, which the guy did. And the funniest part of the story was he was very content with the outcome. He had just paid $10 to get $2.50 back. And he didn't, have the sense to know what he had done. But to him, justice had been served. He got his revenge. I repeat, do you want to be right or do you want to be at peace? It's a simple choice. I choose to see this differently. I choose to just let it go. And then you already feel yourself being lifted up to that higher lightness of spiritual grace. Catherine Ponder, who was a great unity minister, talked about the prospering power of love. If you haven't read one of her books, the bookstore has quite a few of them. She said if people daily practice forgiveness, they would probably put most doctors, psychologists, social workers, and loan companies out of business because everyone would become healthy and prosperous. Wow, that's a pretty amazing statement, isn't it? All about forgiveness, all about letting go so that flow can move on through. So what do you think? Are you willing? Are you willing to forgive? Are you willing to let go of whatever you might have been carrying? Let's just take that into prayer for a moment. You don't even have to be willing to do it right now. Are you willing to be willing? Some days I just say to God, okay, God, I'm willing to be willing. Help me out here. Are you willing to be willing? And then allow the Spirit of divine love flowing in and through us now, assisting us and strengthening us with the ability to release and let go and allow that flow take place in our life again. That abundant flow in every area of our lives. Health and wealth, friendships, relationships, peace, courage, strength, light, grace flows effortlessly with grace and with ease, taking us to that higher experience. And we are so grateful once again in each other's presence. We pray these things in the nature of the living Christ, and so it is, so it truly is. Amen.